Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Pigskin Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, the sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, joined by Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com. The Talkin Tide Twitter feed, of course, is Talkin_Tide. You can get links to all our podcasts right there. Of course, you can get them wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, we're live on YouTube and Facebook as well. Thanks to viewers and listeners for joining us here on this Wednesday nighter as we tackle a preview of the Alabama LSU game. Quick thanks to our sponsors. Locally, that would be North River Dental Associates and Peterbrook Chocolatier. And, of course, our corporate sponsor, DraftKings. More on all of them later in the program. Travis, we jump right in with a look at Alabama LSU. Of course, we're coming off a week off in which you and I both did a little bit of traveling, recharged the batteries a little bit as the Crimson Tide was idle last week. You went across the pond. I was in Columbus, Ohio last weekend, as a matter of fact, to see the daughter's soccer game. Never been to Columbus before. So you went a lot further than I did for sure. Saw a lot more exciting things, but hopefully we both got recharged enough for this final 4-game stretch of the regular season.
Yeah, we both saw some soccer. I saw some footy over in Fulham, sort of a section of London, and Premier League soccer, man. I gotta give it to those folks when it comes to the passion. Goodbread, you would have enjoyed it. They go hard in the pregame because with these Premier League teams over there, they're almost neighborhood teams, right? Whether it's Manchester Manchester City, Fulham. And they have the pubs. They're piled up in the pubs as if it were an SEC town before a kickoff. Mm-hmm. Then you roar over to the stadium. You take in the match, and then you're right back into the pub. So, yeah, a little bit of a cultural diversification for yours truly. It looked like you had did you have a Buckeye donut? Did I see that correctly?
Well,
can I get a review for that?
Yes,
for that donut?
It was outstanding. Really quickly, yeah. We went to Columbus, Ohio. The daughter was actually playing. My daughter Elaine was actually playing a conference tournament soccer game in Findlay, Ohio, which is about an hour and a half outside of Columbus. But to get there, you fly into Columbus. So we went ahead and stayed in Columbus there for about a day and a half, I suppose. And yeah, Columbus, apparently, I'd never been to Columbus in my life, but apparently they fancy themselves the donut capital of the world or something, because there's a mom and pop donut shop, seems like on every corner. And Buckeye Donuts happens to be open 24/7, 7 days a week. They never close over there. And so
speaking of pubs, yeah.
Right. So the wife and I had a flight out of Columbus early on Sunday morning. Decided to pop in there at about 5 before we headed to the airport. Had me a Buckeye donut, big dollop of peanut butter right in the center of a chocolate glazed. And yeah, it was absolutely hard to beat for sure. You can't go, you pretty much can't go wrong grabbing a donut anywhere up in Columbus, Ohio. Moving on though, Travis, LSU, Alabama, of course, a huge game this week, the game in the SEC West. Not quite the game in the SEC. We'll get to Tennessee, Georgia on the back end of the program, but the Crimson Tide on the road in Tiger Stadium, going to be a 6 p.m. kickoff on ESPN. Your thoughts, Travis, as both these teams come off an idle week, both teams healed up a little bit. And Nick Saban noting in his news conference tonight that Bryce Young is really now just getting back to practice because although he's played and played well against Tennessee and Mississippi State since that right shoulder injury against Arkansas, until this week, he's really not practiced.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest positive that we can basically assign a definitive statement to when it comes to the bye week, because last season Alabama came off this bye week and it was anything but a dominant November, I would say. As you recall, scored just 20 points at home against LSU coming off that bye, and up and down. Had a poor performance on the road offensively at Auburn to cap the month. Had a shootout with Arkansas and Tuscaloosa in the middle of all that. So we'll see from that perspective. But, yeah, from a health standpoint, I think this team very much needed it, starting with Bryce Young and extending to some positions skill related on offense in addition to Bryce Young, and then on the defensive side of the ball as well.
LSU's defense, at least when it comes to stopping the run, has been up and down, especially early in the season. I think pretty disappointing, Travis. But you got to say their best performance of the year against the run comes right off of this Ole Miss game, right? They knock off the number one rushing team in the conference in Ole Miss, held them, I think, to 20 points, showed up well. And it's of note because Alabama's coming off its worst rushing performance probably against Mississippi State. Jahmyr Gibbs just 10 for 37, I think, on the ground against the Bulldogs. So where it starts, I think, for Alabama offensively, even though Bryce Young is going to throw the football a lot, Bryce Young is the centerpiece of this offense. But to make things easier on Young on the road, you got to get Jahmyr Gibbs off to something better than 10 for 37.
You do, and it was a historically poor performance on the ground in this game a year ago in Tuscaloosa. So, yeah, I'll be interested to see if Gibbs and Jace McClellan don't look to have a little more spring in their step, because I thought they too, at the end of that 8-game stretch to start the season, were showing some of the effects of that. So hopefully the rest and the recovery's been good for both those guys. But yeah, that offensive line needs to find some semblance of continuity and consistency. Darian Dalcourt in at center, Seth McLaughlin in at center. They've had a little bit of a revolving door situation right there in the middle of the offensive line. And I think Nick Saban talked about it earlier in the week. Maybe some more diversity in how they run the ball, Chase, to help with some of that.
Yeah, for sure. And not only have we seen Dalcourt and McLaughlin in and out at that center position, but of course you still got that strange thing going on at guard with Tyler Booker popping in at both guard spots and in the middle of games. That's something that we've really never seen before, at least in the Nick Saban era, is essentially a platoon on the offensive line. And it's been in place now, not the whole season, but for most of the season. New offensive line coach maybe behind that, Travis, but unusual for sure because of course the offensive line traditionally is an area where you want to pick your best five, get some cohesion and chemistry between them, and just run with those five as much as possible.
And remember, there was a time when we were really far more concerned about offensive tackle. Remember that? It seems like 10 years ago now. But one of the consistent themes from Nick Saban has been a lack of consistency in the run game. Now, do you assign all that to the interior and some of the situations we're talking about? No, I don't think so, because I think every aspect of it, Alabama can be better. I think in terms of even edge blocking, perimeter blocking, including the tight ends and the wide receivers in that, they haven't been as good as they need to be at times. But it has been interesting, to say the least, with Eric Wolford in his first season overseeing that offensive line. I think there's positives to it. You're happy that a guy like Tyler Booker is a true freshman, has apparently shown enough that he is considered to be essentially a starter. But typically in this day and age, if you like a guy, you go with him, right? So that has been an interesting. It almost feels like the old days of the messenger guards in football, where you would run guards in and out with the play call.
Right.
Going way back for some of the leatherheads out there.
All right, defensively for Alabama, we'll switch to that side of the ball now, Travis. Obviously, a huge matchup is going to be the pass rushers, Will Anderson Jr. and Dallas Turner, against a couple of freshman offensive tackles for LSU. Nick Saban brought them up as two guys that have improved quite a bit. One of them, of course, Will Campbell on the left side, Emory Jones on the right. Jaden Daniels, just to be just in full disclosure, he's been sacked more than any quarterback in the SEC. He's been sacked 25 times. That's even more than Will Levis, who I think is pretty close to 25. So Pass protection has certainly been an issue for LSU, but they only gave up one sack in a big win over Florida, which I guess was 3 weeks ago. Ole Miss got to Daniels 4 times, but those tackles for LSU at this point in the season, they've settled in. And as you and I have talked about before, once you reach November, freshmen who have been starting all year really aren't freshmen anymore, are they?
They're not. And here's the thing too with Daniels. If you don't sack him, he can be a real problem. And we heard Nick Saban talk about that really throughout the week. And this is a guy who leads the SEC in runs of 10 yards or more right now as a quarterback. So that does speak to his ability to evade the pass rush and also what they do with him on zone read and quarterback design runs. So his legs a big part of the storyline for Saturday night. And I think roughly half of LSU's runs of 10 yards or more have come from Jaden Daniels. He leads them in carries by more than I think twice his next nearest guy, or right around twice anyway. I think it's 114 carries for him, 66 for Josh Williams, the running back, something like that. So this is a guy who's going to have the ball in his hands on just about every play, obviously, but I'm talking about in terms of run, throw. He's the guy you got to account for.
You got to account for him. It's a little bit more difficult too when you like to play as much man defense in the secondary as Alabama does. You can't spy on them with those DBs because their eyes are on their matchups among the receiving targets, and so maybe you spy a linebacker on them, but yeah, even when you do that, sometimes you can miss that open field tackle, and a guy like Jaden Daniels can be off to the races, and so. It's probably one of those games where we'll see Alabama's defensive line maybe try to be a little bit more under control and a little bit more disciplined and keeping him in the pocket and to the best of their ability, shrink the pocket without giving them a wide open lane to run through and take off.
Yeah, whether it's a linebacker or safety, it's a tough ask. This guy, he's not going to run through people, but certainly in the open field, it can be problematic for your linebackers, whether that's Henry Toa or maybe it's Jalen Moody this week. Maybe it's Deontay Lawson. That's one of the questions we'll have going into the game, I think, at that weak side position, because unlike Mississippi State, it's going to be more of a nickel game. It's not going to be as much of a dime game. So even with some of these defensive linemen who were out for Mississippi State, DJ Dale, Jaheim Otis, you're going to play more with 2 defensive linemen throughout the game, and you're going to play more with a weak side linebacker on the field too.
Yeah, Dale, Otis, and Lawson, none of them played against Mississippi State. Saban confirming earlier this week that Dale and Otis are back at practice. So you would assume that we'll see at least one, if not both of them, for Alabama on Saturday in Baton Rouge. Not altogether clear what the situation with Lawson is or whether he'll be back. Perhaps Saban will catch that question on his Thursday night radio show. But big for Alabama, Travis, to get Dale and Otis back. Those 2 guys, particularly Otis, who's done a remarkable job as a freshman. That's a difference-making tandem, I think, and you can't you don't want to be sitting third string at any position, but in the middle of the defensive line, you can't be soft in there.
No, and they don't have a war daddy per se in that group. They don't have a Deron Payne, um, or Quinnen Williams right now. But this is a game where you need as many of those types as you can get. They can still get away with certainly Byron Young playing more inside and Tim Smith playing inside in the nickel. But Otis is a guy who can not only make some plays time to time, he can defend your inside linebackers from blocks, probably more so than anybody they've got right now. So
Mm-hmm.
that would be nice to have him, especially when you're also dealing with the quarterback aspect of the run game.
No doubt about it. Holding down penalties obviously also going to be big for Alabama. One of the things I wrote in the Tuscaloosa News on Monday got into the difference between Alabama's penalty issues on the road versus at home, they really haven't been all that bad penalty wise at home. They've just been downright awful on the road, averaging 14 flags a game through 3 road games so far. Can't do that again in Baton Rouge.
You can't. And so, you're going to think about the offensive side of the ball again, but, pass interference certainly comes into play, as we saw at Tennessee. And interesting from that perspective, because it looks like you're going to have a different corner in there with Eli Ricks opposite Kool-Aid McKinstry. And it kind of goes back to the scenario you talked about earlier. How much man coverage are you going to play against these capable LSU receivers? I don't think Eli Ricks is in the lineup to play zone myself. I think you put him in there because you feel like you can stick him on some guys and he can take care of them from a man-to-man perspective. But I'm sure they're going to want to mix it up some. They're not going to want to just be man the entire game, but that's going to be something to keep an eye on as well. And the pre-snap penalties on offense. J.C. Latham has played better and better each week, it seems like, but he has had his struggles on the road with the false start. So how does the sophomore, his first year as a starter, how does he deal with that Saturday night and what's expected to be a raucous environment?
Ticket man, Travis, the get-in price for this Alabama LSU game is roughly $125 up in the upper reaches of Tiger Stadium. It runs up to about $13.50 for the primo seats. I did come across one guy on StubHub, Travis. He stamped a $2,200, $22.50 he wants for a ticket, I think, on around row 50, right on the 50-yard line.
Mm-hmm.
It's about $1,000 more than everybody else was asking in the same section. But hey, take your shot, right?
Take your shot. He must not really want to sell that ticket, though.
Yeah,
is all I can think. But weather could play a role in this too, because the forecast for Saturday into Sunday in Baton Rouge didn't look all that good. It is just Wednesday evening as we do this, so we'll see how the next couple of days go.
Reminds me of that guy that you came across when Jason Isbell had his reunion with the drive-by truckers in Florence, Alabama, and somebody online was trying to put the screws to the fan base for I don't remember what the price was, maybe 4 or 5 times what anybody else was asking, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's always that guy or that gal, that person out there, and sometimes, but like you said, shoot your shot. You never know, man.
You never know. All right, Alabama, a 12.5-point favorite over LSU again seems high. It's more games than not. It seems like the spread is just a little bit too much. I don't know off the top of my head what Alabama's record against the spread this season is. I suspect it's under 500 because they've come in as heavy favorites in a lot of games and played some that have been kind of on the close side. This one for me, Travis, I think I like LSU plus 12.5 at home. I like Alabama to win the game, but I think LSU keeps this one tighter than that.
Yeah, I'll take those points in LSU. I'll take the points anyway. You're right. I mean, when you think about it, Tennessee, obviously, Alabama does not cover on the road. On the road at Texas, do not cover. Covered late, made you work at Arkansas. It seems like this team has handled its business against the lesser teams on the schedule, right? The Utah States and some of those situations. Vanderbilt, they've covered, but in situations like this, it hasn't happened as much.
I nearly gave out LSU plus 12.5 this week, Travis, for the weekly spread pick. I changed my mind last minute and ended up giving out Arkansas laying 13.5 to the Liberty Flames. I saw that, and look, I know Liberty's played some good football this year. They hung right there with BYU. That they've played a couple of Power Fives, as a matter of fact, and acquitted themselves pretty well. But I tell you, I was on the sideline in a different job when I worked for NFL.com, but I was on the sideline for that Ole Miss Liberty game last year in Oxford. And I mean to tell you, it was like men and boys out there. I
The
mean,
discrepancy in rosters.
They did not belong on the field with Ole Miss whatsoever. And that was with Malik Willis at quarterback. And I get it that Ole Miss of 2021, certainly a better football team than Arkansas of 2022. But I just couldn't get that out of my mind, Travis. You can't transform a roster from one year to the next that much. I'm taking the Hogs against Liberty. I think that line's a little low.
Yeah, Hugh Freeze with a chance to really make a statement for the Flames. But I'm with you. I would feel okay about Arkansas in that scenario, even though that back end of that defense would keep me up a little bit maybe at night thinking about the potential for that backdoor cover late.
Shoestring cover.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Going to thank a couple of sponsors here on Talkin Tide right now really quickly. Going to start by telling you a little bit about North River Dental Associates and Dr. Jack Smalley, that great bunch of dental hygienists over there at 1100 Fairfax Park, right off of Watermelon Road. Well-trained staff doing all kinds of dentistry, the porcelain veneers, the cosmetic dentistry, pediatric dentistry, laser dentistry, endodontics, dentures, the always popular teeth whitening services, also doing Botox and Juvederm treatments to tighten up those facial features. Over at North River Dental Associates, they're going to get you in and out of the chair in under an hour, in and out of the building, as a matter of fact, in under an hour, typically on a routine cleaning. And the quality of work is just outstanding. I trust Dr. Jack with my teeth and my family's teeth. You should too. The phone number over there is 752-3506. Dial them up if you'd like to make an appointment, or you can do it online. Just go to northriverdentist.com. It is North River Dental Associates.
I'm going to tell you about Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. There you see the staple, one of the staples of Peterbrook Chocolatier, a couple of them actually, those daily hand dipped chocolate strawberries, the chocolate covered popcorn, the signature item there at Peterbrook Chocolatier. Still got all of those Roll Tide treats for you as they move throughout the football season at 1530 McFarland Boulevard North in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. Look, the holiday season is here. I've talked to you about it over the last several weeks. Still not too late to go ahead and get those Christmas orders in right now at Peterbrook Chocolatier, 205-752-0211. Let that staff take care of that for you right now. It's Peterbrook Chocolatier, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North.
Finally, going to tell you all about our corporate sponsor, and that would be DraftKings. Hey, touchdowns are happening over at DraftKings. You want to get in on that action. They're an official sports betting partner of the NFL, and they've got some unbeatable offers right now. New customers can make any $5 NFL bet and get $200 in free bets if your team wins. You just can't beat that. To make things even sweeter, you can throw down on stepped up same game parlays once per game day all season long at the DraftKings Sportsbook. Now, you got to use that promo code TPPN. That's the Pigskin Podcast Network acronym. That'll help us out here at Talkin Tide when you sign up. Again, it is promo code TPPN. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN. Get $200 in free bets if your team wins. Just place a $5 bet on any football game only at the DraftKings Sportsbook. So check them out. Once again, it is DraftKings. Travis, we'll jump around the SEC really quickly as we always do to close things out here on Talkin Tide. Brian Harsin out at Auburn. A painfully long exit for him that really was signaled 9 months ago. And Auburn finally decides to pull the plug. President pulls the plug. They pick a new AD same day pretty much, or certainly same week, and John Cohen, a Tuscaloosa native, as a matter of fact. But Brian Harsin out, Travis, and Auburn looking for a new football coach. Carnell Williams, by the way, the former outstanding Auburn running back, has been named the interim coach. So a new start down on the Plains.
Yeah, back around 10 years ago, I don't think I'd have had Cadillac Williams on my in my
bingo
card for Auburn football coaches at some point down the road. But hey, good for Caddy. Maybe he's gonna, help inject some life into this team. It's doubtful at this point, just not a good football team. And look, I think Brian Harson's a good coach. I think Brian Harson will have an opportunity to coach next year at the Power 5 level, probably somewhere west of the Mississippi, which speaks to the sort of fit that he was or wasn't at Auburn. And frankly, right now, who is a good fit at Auburn, right? I know there's some lists out there, and folks feel pretty certain about some guys as slam dunk candidates, and maybe there are. But in terms of the attractiveness of that job, given the situation involving the AD and now the head football coach, John Cohen made a couple of football hires at Mississippi State. Joe Moorhead did not work out. Mike Leach has been okay. So it'll be interesting to see where this ends, Chase.
Yeah, I think a couple of those candidates we're seeing floating around are ridiculous. I think there's about a 0 chance of Auburn hiring Lane Kiffin. I don't think you're going to see Prime going to Auburn. I do think Hugh Freeze makes a good bit of sense on a number of fronts. I think Hugh would like to get back into the SEC. I think Auburn could afford him despite all the buyout money that they're having to pay. Not only Harsin, but of course they're still paying Gus Malzahn. They're not too far removed from that buyout, Travis. I think Hugh Freeze makes some sense. He's beaten Alabama a couple times, by the way. To me, there's a couple of betting sites out there, Travis, that have got a board that you could bet on and pick the next Auburn coach. And Hugh Freeze is a slight favorite among some of those other candidates that I mentioned. Leopold from Kansas was on that list, I believe. But to me, he's a pretty heavy favorite. I think that if I had to put my own money on it, it'd be on Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, that would make the most sense to me, with the exception of the obvious issues that he had at Ole Miss,
right?
In a multitude of areas during the finishing kick, I guess you could say, of his tenure there in Oxford. But I'm with you. I think what Auburn's going to try to avoid, obviously, is a similar situation than the one it was just in. There are a lot of good football coaches out there, but it has to be someone specific that can fit that place. And I think you have to be a little bit different. As long as Nick Saban's at Alabama, if you think you're going to just match up like for like with Alabama and even Georgia, because that's the other side of this thing with Auburn too. You're going to see Georgia every year. Now, we could see some changes to the SEC schedule at some point that maybe removes that from the situation. But boy, if you're going to try to line up with Kirby and Nick right now, schematically, in a lot of ways, and then you're essentially saying we've got to go out and recruit players of that same level, and that's where the trick doesn't work as well. So, I think you got to be a little bit different, and I do think Hugh Freeze, even offensively, brings something like what you saw with Gus. And whatever you thought of Gus as a head coach and that offense, he did have 3 wins, right, over Alabama, Nick Saban during his time there.
Yeah, Hugh Freeze and Gus Malzahn are very tight, as a matter of fact. I've had a chance to talk to Freeze, I don't know, maybe a year ago it's been now, and he told me Malzahn was his best friend in the coaching business. So if there is something going on with Auburn and Hugh Freeze, you can bet that conversation or two is going to be happening between Freeze and Malzahn. Jimbo Fisher, meanwhile, Travis, unfireable. Things get worse and worse in College Station, and the boys are on the hook. He's completely unfireable. $86 million is what they would owe Jimbo if they cut him loose after this year. That's untenable even for that Texas money, I think.
They got a pretty big brass spittoon out there, Goodbread, and the boys don't mind filling it up.
They're going to have to fill it up, all right.
A couple times, It's kind of like some of those Sundays at church when they pass that tray like 3 times, like it's a volleyball serve rotation or something going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might have to be the equivalent of that. But, we
Yeah, this
talked
last
about it.
pass around is for the sisters of the poor,
Yes, yes, yes. The different initiatives, that it gets passed around for. We talked about it the last time here on the program, I believe, that the scenario of Connor Wigman getting in there at quarterback, the 5-star freshman doing just enough to give there's some fuel to let Jimbo have a full year with Wigman, and then we'll decide.
He's got a
And so
rifle. He's got a rifle.
he's a real deal, man. I've said it all. I've felt that way all along about the guy. And they did lose the game to Ole Miss, but Wigman certainly had his bright spots. And whether it's Jimbo or the next guy, that's a really nice piece there to build with. I see some Matt Stafford when I watch Connor Wigman a little bit. A guy he's not afraid. He's got the big arm. And when you talk about ripping it in the middle of the field, he makes some throws that most freshmen are never going to make.
His ball comes in hot. There's no
Yes,
doubt. You better
Stafford style.
you better have your hands up if you're a wide receiver with Wigman throwing it around. All right, we'll get to Tennessee, Georgia now. Of course, the ball's on the road. Between the hedges, Travis, it's a number 1 versus 2 matchup, at least in the AP poll. Your thoughts as the Vols try to maintain this phenomenal season under Josh Heupel against Georgia? And really, the Tennessee offense versus the Georgia defense, that's the matchup people are excited about, right?
Oh, no doubt. And a tough one for Georgia and losing Nolan Smith on the edge there for the remainder of the season, a first-round draft pick in all likelihood in next spring's NFL draft. And so you worry about that for the Bulldogs. I think it really comes down to this shock and awe of the Tennessee offense, especially early in the game. I think it's critical for Tennessee to get off to another fast start on the road at Sanford Stadium. If Tennessee gets out to that 10-0, 14-0 type of edge, I think they've got a very real chance of winning this game. If they don't, then I think Georgia probably wins the game by 10 or more. I'm going to go with Georgia at home. One of the, and you're right. I mean, absolutely. The marquee matchup is that Tennessee offense against the Georgia defense, but Tennessee's defense has been playing a little better of late. So, that could end up being the thing that surprises us most maybe about this game. I like the dogs at home. I don't know. What are you thinking?
I like the dogs at home. I think the spread's too big. Georgia's favored 8.5. Travis, that's too much for me, but I do think Georgia wins a tight one. You're right about Tennessee's defense. They've crept up now. I think they're about 25th in the country in terms of total yards allowed on the season. Georgia's defense is number 2 in the country. Georgia's only given up 7 touchdowns all year.
Yeah.
So they're playing at a phenomenal level on that side.
I ain't played nobody, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
Oregon looks better and better though, man. That win, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oregon's.
Now, I don't assign much to it because I'm looking at who Oregon's playing these days since that game, but it looks good on paper. It looks better on paper anyway.
Going to be a fun one, no doubt. That's going to be coming right before that Alabama LSU game. So pretty much 7 or 8 hours on the couch without moving for a lot of folks on Saturday, huh?
Yeah, it's going to be. It's almost too warm though in the South still, man. It's not quite chilly weather. This is the perfect chilly Saturday coming up. And I don't think it's going to be, I guess you can eat chili whenever you want, right? But it'd just be nicer if we knew it was going to be, say, mid 50s in Athens for that afternoon kickoff, maybe something in the same neighborhood for Alabama LSU at night at Death Valley, but don't like it's going to happen that way.
Been pretty balmy so far in these first couple days of November. There's no doubt about it. Certainly here in Tuscaloosa.
That's what I liked about Europe. It was fall in Europe, bro. The high every day was 63 or so.
Mm-hmm.
the leaves were either falling or had changed. Yeah, I had to go to damn Europe to get a real fall. So that was a little bit of an extreme there.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Talkin Tide podcast. For Travis Reier of BamaOnline.com, I'm Chase Goodbread, the sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News and the co-host of Crimson Cover Television on WVUA 23. Be sure to join Travis and I on Sunday night when we recap Alabama's game on the road at LSU. Until then, we'll talk to you later.